Welcome to Disrupt Salt Lake City. My name is Jared Olson, and I am joined today with Ben Taylor, the Chief AI Officer and co-founder at ZIFF AI. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And then David Alsop's also joining us. He's the founder of DisruptSLC. So, David, how are you this fine day?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here to talk about AI, learn from Ben, and just understand the opportunities for the future. So it's good to be here.
Yeah, me too. So let's hop into it. Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at your company, and tell us about why you got into AI and about deep learning, and give us a overview of HR professionals. What is AI and how can it impact human capital?
Yeah, so my background is unusual. I came from chemical engineering. Anyone who's been in AI for a while, they didn't come from a formal AI program,
right.
So they didn't have such a thing. So I worked for...
Are there right now? Are there?
There are, so we are working with some. So BYU has a capstone project focused on data science and AI, and this is becoming more common. So I think this is, now people realize kind of the wave is happening, so they're trying to support that. So I studied chemical engineering. I worked for Intel for 5 years, and I think the big breakthrough for me was when I went and worked for a hedge fund. So a hedge fund, they have really good programmers, they understand math, they need to make money.
Yeah.
And so we built out a 600 GPU cluster in the office. We're doing 10 million backtrade tests per day, very aggressive. Mm-hmm. And so I learned a lot. That was a fire hose. And then I joined HireVue, and I was their first data science hire. I helped build out their AI automated insights product,
cool.
Which was really fun because it's hard. You're dealing with video and audio, but it's also you're also dealing with some ethics as well. Yeah. Because the thing we thought about from the beginning was, how do you prevent transferring the worst that humans have to offer? Because AI will learn racism and sexism and all that bias immediately if you allow it to do that. And so I feel like we got to a really good place. So HireVue, I think we're best in. The place they got to, and I know they've gone past that now. They were best in class. When they can actually take a racist training set, build a model, push it to production, and block the bias transfer.
Wow!
So that was stuff that we figured out a couple years ago.
So what are some fundamentals of how do you get that audio and video and actually interpret that into a data set? What's the foundation of how that works?
That's a great question. So before the year 2014, that was very hard to do, but you could do it. So you would literally get a whole room full of physicists or engineers, people that are really crunchy and smart, and you would literally whiteboard ideas, and we did this early on, like a HireVue. Like, okay, we want to consume audio. What can we get from audio? And now, today in 2018, we call all of that stuff, those are classical features. So anytime you have a human in the loop, that doesn't scale very well, it's slow, and you're limited on the research, but people would do that. They come up with, well, I think this is important, I think speech rate is important, or repetition might be useful, and they come up with all these ideas, and months later, they see the light of day. Since 2014, you've had a new technology called deep learning, and it is disrupting everything that has to do with image, audio, and text, and video.
Okay, so what's the difference between AI and deep learning?
So deep learning is kind of a subset within. I think when people say AI, the general public, it kind of depends on who's saying it.
Okay.
Because I think when you get in the data science discipline, people get very strict about this means that. And so the funny thing is, if I'm marketing or if I'm talking to someone, I might say data science or deep learning. But if I'm talking to a general audience, I'll just say AI. So I can see AI as a big umbrella where there's different elements within that. So deep learning is a very specific type of technology. So if I'm an AI handyman, I'm going to fix your dishwasher or build you a model, think of deep learning as a tool. But it's different. It's almost like a tool from outer space. So I had a drill, and I had a little screwdriver. I could do different things. Some tools are better for different things. Deep learning is that disruptive. It is so different than anything we've had before, and a lot of this disruption has blindsided people. Mm-hmm. Like, people have become so respected human experts, Ivy League educated, career dedicated. We would argue they're the smartest human on Earth in their domain. They've been blindsided by deep learning. They've been made obsolete almost overnight. Wow. So linguistics is one. So you're the smartest human in the world when it comes to understanding the English language and what things mean. Your knowledge base is now useless because of what deep learning can do and the insights we can get. In HireVue, we saw this firsthand with some of the benchmarking and comparing across the board. the key difference is deep learning, you gave up the feature engineering to the computer. So before we'd be whiteboarding, hey, I think I should build a model to predict which images are good for a scrapbook. Oh, I think babies are good. Like that would actually, we'd write that on the board. I think babies are good.
Yeah.
Now with deep learning, you give it all over to deep learning. And you're not talking about hundreds, you're talking about tens of millions, hundreds of millions of features that are just, in a few minutes just
So is this all algorithms? Is it
So it's algorithms.
Okay.
The models are, so for HR it's fun. So I've had a lot of fun in HR, speaking at these different HR conferences, and I love HR now. So HR will always have like a special part for me.
Us too.
Well, it's the fun thing with HR is we could be talking about AI with manufacturing, defect detection, different things. If you're talking to a general audience, no one really, it's too niche. They don't really get it. But if you ask a general audience, how many people have applied for a job? How many people have written a resume? Everyone's hands goes up. They all get it. They all immediately relate to what you're talking about. So HR, that impacts everyone. That makes it really fun.
Yeah.
But in HR, the fun thing when HireVue kind of started moving into the space, HireVue was very aggressive with their AI, because I came with a hedge fund background, and the executive team kind of had that insight that they wanted to. They didn't want to crawl, walk, run. They wanted to let's just start sprinting.
Sure.
So going to talk to an HR conference, they're used to dealing with tens of variables, like competencies.
Yeah.
I'm going to hire you. I've got 15 competencies. I only use 5, but I've got 15, and someone else has 80, and that's insane. And then you come to the table and you say, well, I've got 30 million, and it just their brains start exploding. That doesn't make any sense to them. But
okay, so we're seeing a lot of advancement with obviously AI and deep learning in business, and we're starting to see that be introduced more and more into the human resource profession, and it's largely coming in the form of recruiting, like you're talking about with HireVue's product.
Yeah.
Why do you think it has started within the recruiting element of HR?
So maybe there's, and you guys would probably have maybe more of an opinion here, but maybe there's more money there. So if I'm trying to sell you an attrition model, that's not your pain. It's interesting and it's important, but you have something else that hurts a lot more, and you're having issues with recruiting. You don't have enough recruiters to manage the pipeline. You've got urgency to fill seats, and your average time to hire is 50 days or 60 days. And so I think that's why it starts with recruiting, because there's a real pain there that an HR professional will react to, and there's budget. Attrition models, if that was my whole business, I have a really good attrition model, I'd have a hard time generating the revenue that compared to a talent screening model.
Yeah. So what I love about this is that we're starting to see administrative HR be 100% automated, right? So with AI, you can do a video interview, and then that can tell you if this person hits the competencies and if they're a good fit for the company. That is awesome, because it eliminates the need for that initial phone screen, and it takes a lot of it out of the hands of the HR generalist or the recruiter, right?
Yeah.
The
phone screen. So it's interesting because with some of this algorithmic stuff, some of the stuff we're talking about before the podcast, there's pushback. And so you'll get these little groups that kind of bubble up and they say, algorithms should not be involved in this process. They throw out the black mirror, this should not be done. But when they look at the human equivalent, what were humans doing? So I did this at Intel. We do a phone screen. So literally no training. I'm not an HR professional. They say, oh, we have to hire another process control engineer. Ben, can you go print off some resumes? So I go to the applicant tracking system, print off a whole stack of resumes, no coaching. What am I going to do? I don't know. I put the Ivy League resumes in this stack.
Sure.
I look at their GPAs, and the bias, my GPA threshold is different than yours and yours.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it actually ends up being your own. Or something so stupid where, why are you screening at this? Well, I knew based on my small class of 10 that graduated, these people were idiots, and these people weren't, so I screen here. So you're just doing a GPA threshold, Ivy Leagues first, the other, and then you do the phone screen. And I remember doing a phone screen, you tell them up front, this is going to be a 20-minute phone screen, and I remember some terrible ones, where 2 minutes in, it's a no, but you're worried about the brand, and so you're not going to, at the hedge fund, they would do this. The hedge fund, they'd say, you're a dumbass, and they would tell you that in the interview, and they'd end the interview. like a minute in, like bad stuff.
Yeah.
At Intel, we just sit with them on the conference line for 15 minutes. We'd have it on mute, and all the engineers would be talking about why this person is such a terrible fit. So we just wasted our time, not just my time, but like a whole group's time, and we wasted their time.
Yeah.
And so with HireView's product with no AI, like, well, not HireView, but just digital interviewing in general, getting the human to do like this asynchronous.
Totally. So you say you're not only saving the wage and the time from the recruiter, but also from the hiring managers, and in case of engineers that are on the background trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so there's the time saving. And then the example with me doing the resume screen, that's very common.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to, like, what type of integrity is there in that system?
Uh-huh.
Me doing a GPA. So at HireView, we analyzed 400,000 resumes to look at what matters. And your choice of personal email address was 4 times more predictive of you getting a job than your GPA.
So like whether it was a Gmail or a Hotmail or something,
and
like
even
that.
more specific than that. So like, do you have first name, last name existing in your email, or is it powder shots at AOL? Like,
Yeah.
And you get email addresses like that in resumes where, so
Interesting. So deep learning, we're talking about like email, going to the detail of like how they select their email address,
Yeah.
and how that aligns with fitting in with the company.
Yeah, so AI can figure all that out, but the human, the interesting thing is the humans that kind of resist this, they make it sound like the human element of selecting talent is somehow respected or special, and it is special because it's guaranteed to have bias. Like, it's not maybe, it's a guarantee. So the best human on earth, pick who you want, Mother Teresa, she has bias. And you might not think that, but if you put 10,000 candidates through her based on the environment that she's brought up in, you're going to see some gender minority group that is impacted. And
Interesting.
That's guaranteed.
So, David, I'm curious a little bit about this. We've talked quite a bit about how we can automate and eliminate the need for the HR generalist to some extent, right? Because of technology and through applicant tracking systems and HRIS systems, and now involving AI and deep learning. What are some of those things you would like to see in the HR profession eliminated through this new technology that's coming out, other than just recruiting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with our organization, I've been in 2 organizations, Kraft Foods and now Ultradent Products, and it's 2 heavily manufacturing industry related people dynamics. And our struggle is the administration when it comes to just what you're talking about. You know, finding the people, screening the people, the time we put into that. And, you know, in the end, we're having that dynamic where we're spending all that time trying to select the process. And so it's very intriguing. It's also nerve-wracking when we talk to our people about it, because it is that people dynamic of what is my role, how does that exist, and as you guys talk about, and we talk about robot apocalypse, that's scary for people, and I think there's a protectionism that happens. The things that I think outside of recruiting that we have when it comes to administration is the process of just getting people into the system, promoting people, administrating the moves in the system, and that takes a lot of the time of all of my people when it comes to just using a system that is one of the more advanced systems in HRIS, but we still have to be able to clean up data, manage data. So one of our biggest gaps that I wanted to talk to you about and get your perspective on is many organizations are like ours in the startup environment, and then they get to the stage we're at 40 years, and we've got all this data. The accuracy of that data has issues because we have managers and employees all over the board putting data in there, and we spend a lot of time going back and cleaning up data, managing the data, and I think that's one realm where we have a gap, where our first initiative to get to AI in our organization that we're very far away from is how do we get the quality data. And so that's a big part of administration as we think about modern HR, is we're still held back by just administrating the workforce and getting the data right so we can get to automation.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot in the...
Oh yeah, that's kind of a guarantee. So my mindset used to be, you haven't done good data quality checks and you need to start to get ready. But my mindset has kind of changed to everyone has bad data. So even the companies that are, no, we've got this taken care of, we've got labels in place, we've got data quality. When you really dig into it, everyone has data quality issues. And so one of the things we've kind of changed gears on last year is we really focus on allowing AI to be involved in the curation process. So we'll actually work with people that have no labels. Like it would be like, well, I've got got a million resumes sitting in here, and I don't really know what the value is or what's going on. And so we will use AI for topic discovery, kind of like it'll organize some of the data. But data cleanliness, especially in HR, that's an issue everywhere. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that people laugh at is when I'm going through an applicant tracking system. So I'm applying to come work to be a candidate. I upload my resume, and then the very next step is it's asking me to manually fill in all of the elements within my resume. And we kind of smirk today because we're like, there's got to be an AI that'll just do that.
That's super frustrating.
Yeah,
and then it doesn't put one job in there, and so you have to go back and manually add it.
Yeah, and I kind of laugh at that because what's happening is the human is trying to force the AI to plant a feature that they understand well or they think is important. So they think which college you went to and GPA is important. But if you kind of leave that up to the AI, so you do have AI that can do that better than some of the systems we've seen. Mm-hmm. Like I think these applicant tracking systems, they're kind of slow to integrate and bring some of these systems in, but we see a lot more success just turning it over to the AI.
Yeah.
Like, why do you need to know? If the college was important, it would have figured it out. I don't need to have a field called.
So how do you build this system out? Like, okay, we want to hire better. How do we say, here's exactly what matters to us? And how does AI get that information from us?
So that's one of the interesting things we've seen is with HR is people have performance metrics. Mm-hmm. And you have some that are great, like in the financial sector where they have dual manager review at the end of the year, and they have like a 5-tier system, and they have this integrity to how they're doing these ratings and what they count as performance. Or you have something like sales professionals where you kind of have a no-brainer performance metric that's pretty easy. Then you have other industries like healthcare where everyone that works here is great. And okay, so then like the performance is you still work here and you haven't been involuntarily terminated. That's not really a great performance metric. Okay. And so we see that within HR that some companies have it figured out and others don't. It's important to have a good performance metric because if you have a good one, it's defensible. If your metric is you still work here, you're more exposed. Like mm-hmm. So if you did have an algorithm to predict from resume to you still work here, all right, can you really defend that? But if you have an algorithm from resume to call center, like first call resolution metrics or sales quota attainment, you're standing on pretty safe ground because you can defend that.
So as you're working with your clients, is that where you spend most of your time, is actually figuring out what you need the AI to accomplish?
Yeah, so with the stuff we do now, we've kind of, unfortunately, it's good and bad. So I won't be attending most of the HR conferences this year because a lot of the stuff we deal with now is outside of HR. Mm-hmm. But across the board, that is a general thing that happens where you iterate on the data. So we'll build a model, they'll see the model, and they'll react to it, and then they'll change their data set. So we think it's really important to be in a situation where you can iterate.
Yeah.
You need to be able to see some results and look at them and realize, oh, like, that's not what I wanted. And then usually you have to go back to the data and you'll predict something else. Or it seems like once people see the ability to predict performance, there are always action items around improving that.
So recently I've been looking at a couple of tools that use chatbots, right? Mm-hmm. And the form that you'd use it within HR has to do with like discrimination. So like I feel like I've been harassed or discriminated against. I go to this chat box. I type in, hey, here's the harassment or discrimination that occurred. The chat bot will then engage with me to like actually determine did something happen, and then it can kick it over to the HR professional. Mm-hmm. How do you think chat bots can influence the future of managing employee questions? Like instead of going to HR to their manager, do you think that is a good solution to help remove that element of just general inquiries?
I think it's excellent. So you remember, so Watson, they have a big reputation. The Jeopardy game was really impressive that they were able to kind of search through their entire Wikipedia dump and find what was needed. And I think today, good AI, so you kind of have junk, decent, and good and state-of-the-art. So state-of-the-art AI would actually do a fantastic job if you had a few questions and immediately finding what you needed. Mm-hmm. Kind of like imagine a Google search within your own company.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Anytime you're doing content lookup, AI would do an excellent job with that.
Okay. So, David, I got a thought here that I've been thinking about of how do we automate the performance management experience? So instead of having to sit down and talk to a manager and say, hey, here's where I'm at on my performance goals, here's where I want to head next month, and like just kind of get that feedback from performance management side, how do you think the HR profession, what would we benefit from in a HRIS system or some kind of software that could automate part of that? And in your mind, as I throw this out to you right now, how do you envision that actually possibly playing out so that you have to have less interaction between employee and manager?
Well, I think Ben hit on one thing that is key is metrics. I mean, if you don't have anything to measure, you don't have anything to go into a system, you don't have anything to have algorithms to really come out and say, here's where this employee's at. So for me, when I think about where we're going from an AI standpoint in the profession, a lot of organizations I've been in and where we're trying to figure out our future at Ultradent is how do you have the right metrics for each job and each function that aligns up through the organization to push up the strategy of the organization. But when you don't have metrics, you don't have any measures, you're really in a place where it's only left to the bias of the relationship or the manager perception, right? And so metrics, as I see it, is the key. And so an example that we've been looking at and is a possibility that we see in peer companies that use Workday, which is the system we use, is when you have the metrics, you have the performance measures that are in Workday, and then you combine that with talent information, resume information, performance discussions, and their potential. The possibilities come up where the system ends up telling the manager, hey, you've got a retention risk here. You talked to this person and you had a rating where this person's high performing, they're a high talent. It's been 2 years, they wanted to move in 1.5 years, and that's where you see it. But if you don't have the measures, if you don't have the metrics, and you're not able to have a logical process that gives you that information, the system can't do it. And so I think this is the struggle of many organizations where it is so reliant on the manager perception without an objective metric that I think that's the gap that a lot of organizations face, and that's what we face, is where we don't have those metrics. What do you put into a system to assess people and make the right decisions?
So maybe we even need those systems to require you to put in what the metrics are that you're looking for. And if you don't put that information there, it can't populate it, and then it can't run that data set or whatever to actually find out how the employee is doing.
Right. And I think, Ben, this is a question for you that as we talk about those kind of discussions, because we're far from that state and we're trying to build up our data quality and get those metrics. Yeah. One of the pushbacks we get and one of the discomforts we get is we still need the human element to make the right decision. Yeah. And that's a key question that it drives to, and we push back and say, the system combined with that human element can arrive at that, but that'll give more objective information to the manager to get their data set and then make the right decision from there. As I listen to you, it's an assessment I'm hearing that the system in the end can just make the better decision than the manager, and that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people that have been doing it one way for a long, long time.
Yeah, I love the performance metric discussion because some people have pushed back on it. Like I think at SciUp, a few people have said, it's all garbage, don't track any performance, it's garbage, where I disagree, where I feel like in an ideal world, everyone would have a performance metric, and it'd be a number, and it would have a dollar sign attached. And you can see certain industries, like certain jobs, fine. Like you're a sales rep, yeah, I can attach your value to the company, I guess. And if you're a call, like a call service rep, I can attach a value to you based on like how many calls are you resolving, timeline, satisfaction. But when you get into something like I'm a developer, I write code in a team of 30 developers, that becomes like, you committed code this week, what's it worth to the company? That becomes really hard to kind of unpack. But there is some stuff in the middle, like we were dealing with some flight attendants, and the only metric they had was, do they make it through training? So they have like these different training steps, and we can predict if they make it through training, but really what they care about is, are you a flight attendant? And a year from now, are you rude? Like, are you actually impacting our customer satisfaction? And that was hard. They had never really thought about it that way. But if you've got multiple flight attendants on a flight, actually, I don't have to know your name as a flight attendant. I just have to complain. So if enough people are complaining, there is AI and data science that can eventually figure out you.
Yeah,
it's
right.
you, even though I never like said your name. But me complaining about, oh, this flight was the best. This flight is terrible. I hated it. I'm never flying with this company again. Or the flip side, that I had the most amazing flight attendant. Those types of feedbacks at the flight level eventually can be tied down, and that type of performance metric is really, that gets closer to the money, where then you figure out, oh, this is a bad apple, they need it out. So I think as people think about how do you get to it, but it's hard. Like some positions you'll realize we'll never get there.
Yeah. What about communication, right? So let's just say that we get the right data. We want to communicate that with employees. When it comes to performance management, I'm still thinking like, okay, we now have the data, as David's talking about. We know what the metrics are that we need to hold this person accountable to. Could you text message them? Like, can the product do that where it could say, hey, employee, today you're in charge of doing this task according to your performance goals and objectives? Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've met in the past with Randy Garnett and Scipio, and they're doing these really cool text campaigns because millennials and people today look at their cell phones all the time. I mean, here we are, we all have our cell phones with us, and we're looking at them. And it's because we get that information and we respond quickly. And so could you, through AI, one, find out, okay, here's how to manage the employee, here's what their objectives are, here's their deadlines, and then could it communicate through that device as well?
Yeah, so they call that prescriptive analytics, where you have recommendations on what you need to do to achieve that promotion. But AI is a little weird because when it comes to performance management, as a human, you can kind of give them you can make something up. Like you can kind of give this political response of like, well, like you're such a great employee, but you know in your mind that you're never getting this promotion ever. But the human kind of has a soft way of like skirting that issue.
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, where AI, if you wanted AI to cough up the reasons, AI could be extremely blunt. And it could actually, even though AI is giving you this prescriptive insight that, oh yeah, you need to study this today and you need to work on this competency, the AI could actually know that you will never get this promotion. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you don't have to do that. You can give coaching.
So it might be really interesting with career planning and succession planning as well, of like, is this person going to make it in the company or not? And should they stick around, or is it time for them to leave? Like, if they're disengaged, we know based off of the data that they're not going to be a good fit, so maybe they should get out of here.
Yeah. And I've seen that firsthand, where you've got someone in a company, they've been there for 20 years, they're maxed on their compensation, they can't break through to the next level, they have no motivation.
Yeah.
They don't want to learn anything new. They show up, 5 minutes late and they leave 10 minutes early, and and they're trying to cruise above like the PIP status. Like they don't want a performance improvement plan, but they want to just be right above that. And you don't want that
either. Yeah. So another question for you is, we've started to see more HR teams be hiring for data scientists. Why do you think HR would be a good profession to have a full-time dedicated data scientist? And do you think that it's best to have someone on staff, or do you think it's best to find a product out there or partner with an agency like your own that could solve that? And what are the pros and cons to having an on-staff HR department data scientist?
Yeah, so I guess back to your point that HR data is messy. Like there's lots of problems with it, and most HR professionals, they don't have that skill set or the time to dive in there and fix it. But a data scientist, they can bring them in. And a lot of these companies are hiring HR data scientists, which I think is great. With any data science vertical, I would always discourage against reinventing the wheel. So if there's a vendor out there that does a certain type of application, a lot of these vendors, they'll come in and do like a low risk or free proof of concept. And if they can get you to value sooner, do that. Because data scientists, they can do custom implementations. They can clean your custom data. They can do a custom attrition model or something that's not supported. But if they're doing something that is supported, you're looking at a long time scale for delivery. Like a resume model or something. They can do it, but there might be a vendor that
Mm-hmm.
So even like being a data science manager, I would always go with a vendor.
Yeah.
Because I want my team to work on hard things,
Yeah.
custom things, weird things, stuff that's not supported.
Cool. So if you're an HR professional and you want to become a data scientist, is that a good jump, or like where are we finding data scientists right now? And if you're trying to hire data scientists for your HR team, like where's the best place to find them, and what kind of skills and qualities are you looking for?
Yeah, they can come from anywhere. I kind of have the opinion that anyone, like literally starting from zero, like so-and-so librarian or guy at the gas station that gave me coffee this morning, anyone can become a data scientist if they're motivated, but within 6 to 12 months. So if you actually just decide every hour I'm spending 4 hours consuming all of this content online, because most of the stuff you need to know is online. It's actually, the universities are slow to catch up because they have like a 5-year cadence on, updating material, but data science is moving a lot faster. At HireVue, it was funny because we ended up having a really strong bias towards PhD physicists. Like everyone we hired had a PhD in physics. And the funny thing is, the last hire I was involved with before I left, the CTO and I decided we will not hire a PhD physicist because you want to add diversity. Because it kind of, you're more likely to have something creative or you have diversity of thought. So we decided ahead of time we will not hire a PhD in physics. We still did. But with my startup, we hired a college dropout. And he's actually working out really, really well. We've been really happy with him. So I feel like an HR professional could, but they have to learn how to code and they have to ramp on some of the machine learning stuff. But I feel like it's all the information's out there and the content is really good. It's easy to learn.
Cool.
So Ben, you just triggered a question for me is, how did you find that PhD, that dropout that's working out well for you? Because that's the challenge for people is, you guys probably index towards the PhD because it's that trusted, they have the paper dictation, and you guys found someone that is working out well because they learned it away from the school.
And I've seen that before. So I was giving a presentation at BYU 3 years ago, and it was on deep learning. No one really knew what it was. And this college group I was presenting to, they don't know what it is. And I remember there's a kid and some of them were asking about getting a job, like, AI school, how do I get a job eventually? And I was talking about it. There's a kid on the front row who's asking questions that just kind of, you should not be asking this question. He's asking questions about like MXNet versus Torch versus Siamese nets, like questions that most data scientists at the time did not know. This random kid is asking that. And I remember leaving that thinking, well, that person's not going to have a hard time getting a job. And sure enough, like 2 weeks later, he was the first data science hire at this local company. He actually beat PhDs. He was a dropout. He was currently dropping out of his master's program, and now he works for Microsoft. So I guess the key thing I focused on is passion. So he had enough passion. He had self-taught him stuff where not knowing him, just a few questions he asked kind of made me pause, like, who are you? What are you studying?
Yeah,
like,
right.
He didn't learn any of that in school. So passion. So this kid that we hired who was a dropout, his passion is extremely high. Like this is his life. He just consumes and consumes, and,
cool.
And that's what people want.
So we've been talking about in HR, eliminating the need for the HR generalist, but do you see a lot of positions in business being eliminated through deep learning and AI?
I do. I think HR will be actually one of the last because we deal with some of the stuff we've been talking about, like the performance stuff, and those problems are hard. The data's not good. Some of the performance stuff, like a developer, can you ever actually nail a developer performance?
Lines of code, does it pass? And you can run it a million different ways, and it may pass or fail. And
so if you decide on some metrics, you're going to quickly find out that they will start manipulating the system. Like if there's single lines of source code or number of commits, that's going to go through you're going to have so many commits tomorrow. So I think HR will be some of the last. You're going to have things like, if you have a narrow, so in AI we talk about general AI. HR almost needs a general AI to do anything useful. Then you have narrow AI, that'd be like a resume screen, or in manufacturing it's a QA step. Like my whole job is to decide if this X-ray worked on this weld, or if this, if this is a defect. That's my whole job. AI will consume all of those tasks at a superhuman level, if not today, very, very soon. And And so there's an estimate out there, 7% of the workforce will be replaced in the next 10 years, and I think that number will be much higher than that. It'll be the highest. So we go through these epochs. You had the Industrial Revolution, the computer revolution, the internet, and the mobile revolution. A lot of people lose their jobs. A lot of people make a lot of money. The AI revolution will be the biggest that we've ever had. You're going to have the most layoffs, and then you have people like Mark Cuban saying it's going to create the world's first trillionaire, which sounds ridiculous, but then we see a $1 trillion market cap coming from Apple and Amazon. You realize, oh, well, if you had a $10 trillion market cap, I guess you could have a trillionaire. And you'll see that with AI.
So it's really going to force the administrative business that happens to just become more strategic, because those positions are eliminated, now need to find a different role to like add more value to the company and not just be paper pushers.
Yeah. So really what you're going to see is we call it a human amplification. So the human efforts that you do today will be amplified, and then you'll focus on the things that are harder to do. Or you'll feed the AI with more insight, more features, because you're the domain expert. The AI is not the domain expert. So if you have insight that I actually know something the AI doesn't know, well, you should tell the AI. You should start adding those features. So you will have a transition there, but it is strange to think about the future where even data scientists, there's going to be a big bubble where the need to hire a data scientist. So as we talked about, like, recreating the wheel are custom, eventually all the custom problems will be gone. It's like, well, are you going to build an image classifier? Because I can get that done for, a few pennies. Or like, what are you going to do? What am I going to do in the future? So there's a really strange future coming.
Cool. What are some of the favorite tools that you are seeing out there that involve AI right now that could influence or impact the human resource industry?
So HR specific, just vendors and tools, so Pymetrics, they're out there. They do some of the game assessments, which I think is really cool. I know HireVue just added that as well. So you have video interviewing, you have these game assessments, you have some of the phone screening. Some of the pushback that's come on the digital interviews, you don't get social feedback. So if I'm interviewing and I start to go off the rails, you'll actually give me you'll give me a cue through some facial feedback that will allow me to, I totally screwed up that question, I'm going to save myself in the interview. And so that's been some of the negative feedback with these one-sided interviews is you don't have that personal feedback. And so maybe in the future there will be improvements there where AI is convincing you that there is personal feedback, or maybe people just decide that's not important. But yeah, so screening, you see a lot of companies out there helping with screening.
So a lot going within ATSs, but HRIS systems still have a lot of room for movement, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think that just because those are hard problems.
Yeah.
Ben, maybe one question to leave a lot of our listeners with is we're going to have a lot of people listening that may not have that data expertise, but they're in organizations where they have a desire to get there.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to those people if they want to get there, but they're not there yet? And you talked about the healthcare environment where they just don't have a lot of data in the performance management or whatever it may be. If an organization is wanting to get there, what do you think there's 1 or 2, 3 first steps to get there? Where do they start?
So I think an easy first step, we talked about the HR data scientist, that's kind of a big commit. You have college grads coming out right now that they studied to be a data scientist. They're really good at what they do, and some of them are having a hard time getting the data science jobs. And so if you could snag a new college grad as like a summer intern to just work on your data sets for a summer, I think it'd be a bargain, and you'd probably get some pretty good insight, and they'd be totally qualified to just kind of come in, start playing with HR data, and in that effort might justify hiring an HR data scientist. So I think there could be a neat transition with a summer intern, and then if they want to kind of tool up themselves, I would still recommend bringing in an intern and maybe pairing with them. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That would be a better place to start than just starting blindly on, I need to go read some books. And
yeah, so
well,
that's helpful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Ben Taylor, ZIFF AI. thank you so very much for coming in and talking to us today. And we look forward to seeing how the HR profession continues to change with AI and deep learning. And we're grateful for what you're doing to kind of change that cause here in Utah and across the nation and leading the way for us. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
it's been
Ben.
fun.